Hi, readers. As you know, we are continuing to work on our research clubs. We've been studying penguins all together in class, and then you each have your own research club where you are researching and reading and learning all about one particular animal. Well, today I want to teach you that it's important that you're not just paying attention to the information that the author is providing you. Don't get me wrong, that's important. But as readers, you also want to start to think and develop your own thoughts about a topic. And today I want to teach you that one way to start to develop your own ideas or your own thoughts is to actually study the subject of your research the same way that you would study characters in fiction. We do that by paying close attention to the subject's traits, to their motivations, and even their struggles. So, during some of our fictional units, we've studied characters, right? Remember Wemberley? We studied him by paying attention to his traits, his motivations, and his struggles. Well, today I'm going to do that same work. However, I'm going to be doing it with my research topic. I'm going to be doing it with penguins. Yeah, I'm going to pay attention to their traits, to their motivations, and even their struggles. And that's going to help me start to think my own thoughts and develop my own thoughts about penguins. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, I'm going to read to you a passage that's all about penguins. Now, keep in mind, this was actually written for adults, but I am going to be reading it to you. And as I'm reading, I want you to watch the way that I'm kind of noticing about the penguins' traits, about some of their motivations, what they want or need, and some of the struggles that they encounter. Early in the morning, one of the parent birds, either male or female, would set out towards the sea, leaving its mate in charge of the nestlings. Okay, so here I'm already starting to notice about some of their kind of behaviors. And by studying their behavior, that might help me start to learn a little bit about their traits. I'm noticing that, like, the mom or the dad goes out to sea, and then the other one stays behind and takes care of the nestlings. That's a little bit different than other animals, maybe even different from the animals that you've been studying, because typically there's very specific roles for like the mom or the dad, right? The male or the female. But penguins are a little bit different. It seems like they kind of take turns and share the work a little bit more. So it's kind of interesting. And that's an idea that I want to start to like think a little bit more about. I'm going to go ahead and continue reading. In order to get to the sea, the bird had to cover about 1.5 miles of the most grueling and difficult terrain imaginable. First, they had to pick their way through the vast patchwork of nesting burrows. Then, they were faced by the desert area, where the sand was caked and split by the sun, so hot that it was painful to touch. And yet, the penguins would plod dutifully across it, pausing frequently for a rest as though in a trance. But when they reached the other side of the desert, they were faced with another obstacle: the sand dunes. These towered over the diminutive figures of the birds like a snow white chain of Himalayan mountains. When they finally reached the far side of the dunes, there was the sea, blue, glittering, lisping seductively on the shore. And to get to it, they had to drag their tired bodies over the stony beach where the pebbles scrunched and wobbled under their feet, throwing them off balance. But at last, it was over, and they plunged into the cool water. Wow. Okay, I know that was a lot of information, a lot of big words, but one thing that I'm really taking away from this was their motivation to get to the water is so strong. Did you notice some of the things that they had to do? They had to like cover over 1.5 miles, and not just of like any land, some of the most grueling and difficult terrain imaginable. It's really starting to teach us a lot about the way that penguins are acting and how resilient and persistent they are. So, in your notebooks, you already have a page where you've jotted down some subtopics about your animal. Let's take a look at the one that I started creating. Remember, I was noticing different subtopics, and one I had was like on chicks, and them growing up. I was also learning information about their diets, what they eat, their habitats, where they live, their body, different kinds of penguins. And then I even was taking some notes on like interesting facts. But I think at this point that I could start another subtopic specifically on their behaviors. Okay? So I did that as I started to like think my own thoughts. I started to really like grow some ideas about the behaviors of penguins. So now in my notebook, I could have one whole page that's just dedicated to penguin behavior. And some ideas that I started to grow was that like the male and the female, or the dads and the moms, they really share the responsibilities, right? They share like the responsibilities of parenting. And to me, that's something interesting to notice because that's a lot different than other animals. I'm also thinking about that motivation and their traits to be like so brave and so resilient and to never give up, right? And one reason I think that they're doing all of that is because they're so dedicated to their young, to their babies, right? They would basically do anything for them. Oh, and I better make sure instead of babies, I'm using that word chicks, right? Because we want to make sure we're using that topic specific vocabulary. So I think that that's another thing that I will jot down is that they are very, very committed to their young, right? And those are like the chicks. They're willing to like cross that big, grueling, treacherous terrain in order to make sure that they can go hunting for them and get the fish in order to bring it back for the babies to eat. Okay. So, readers, you're going to have an opportunity to do some of this same work today. You are going to start to grow your own ideas, starting to like think your own thoughts. Now, obviously, the first thing that you need to do is spend some time reading, right? So you might be reading out of your book box, or you might be reading off of Epic. Remember that I've assigned each of you multiple books on your animal. So if you finished all of the ones that are in your book box, you could start to read books on Epic. And after you've read a bit more, I want you to take some time to like stop and think so that you could start to grow some ideas. Notice how I was kind of thinking about, that's interesting that like both mom and dad share the parenting roles. It's also kind of inspiring that the way that they like cross that treacherous terrain. So after stopping and thinking to grow some ideas, what did I do? You're right. I took some time to stop and to actually jot that in my reader's notebook. At the end of reading workshop time today, you will actually have some time to talk about your ideas with your club members. So those are the people that are at your table, and you'll have an opportunity to have already thought your own thoughts and then have some time to talk about your thoughts. What were some things that you started to think kind of on your own based on the traits, the motivations, and even the struggles of the animal that you are researching? Off you go, readers.